Sworn to his ancestral god Odin in Asgard by Norse legends. As a former pastor with the Christian church, he has studied extensively throughout the world, and by becoming an indigenous shaman, arriving at his cultural spiritual home of the Celtic Norse. With several advanced degrees, he has developed successful methods of dealing with psychological trauma, thereby helping his friends to build coping mechanisms to get back to their lives filled with joy and comfort. As a sworn UlfHednar, his primary mission is to use his gift from Odin to help friends and family overcome their obstacles and see their way to success. Mark's easygoing personality has made him a favorite of young and old alike, as he never condemns anyone for what they believe, simply shows a way to help them get through tough times, and he produces a simplistic message of peace and hope. Welcome to the Transcendent Minds Podcast, Dr. Mark Wiseman.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. It is an honor and a blessing.
There's a lot I want to cover with you. I don't know if we'll do it all in this 1 hour, but in your tradition as a Celtic Norseman shaman, there's a fascinating interplay between the Celtic and Norse belief systems. And the Celts and Norse share these certain mythological and spiritual elements, such as their reverence for nature and connection with ancient deities. Can you elaborate on how you navigate this intricate blend of traditions and how it informs your spiritual practice?
I absolutely can. Firstly and foremost, I want to say thank you for that introduction. It's wonderful when new people understand the Norse. Unfortunately, way too many people have degraded and have taken the Norse symbology and our culture and attempted to make it mean something that it doesn't. So it's nice to get the word out that we're wonderful people. As far as navigating between the Celtic and the Norse, we have to understand history to understand how those interplayed together. The Celts were first. The Celts, particularly of the Iberian Peninsula and Southern Europe, the Celts were first. And then as time goes on, and of course you have the Romans doing what Romans did, we see a migration of the Celts leading back east across the European continent, essentially winding up in what is today Germany. And then they'll migrate north from that location to become what we know is the Scandinavians, particularly the Danes, which is where my ancestry comes from, is the Danes or Danish people. The Danes were a Celtic Norse tribe there in Germany, and they adopted a lot of what the Celts believed. So if you think about the Celts, when the Celts understood their mythology or their deity structure, it was all based around this centralized concept of energy moving through the universe, and certain bursts of energy could be attributed to a deity. That was really central to the Celtic belief, is that, yes, we understood that nature, and we understand it today, is that nature has its own energy. All of the forms of nature produce a level of energy, including Jord herself, the Mother Earth. All of this energy we can use for our benefit, for our better good. Understanding how to craft it in such a way that it benefits our mental health. But as we see the Celts moving north through Germany and into Denmark particularly, we see an evolution of words where Dagba, who was the centralized deity figure of the Celts, becomes Woden by the time he's in Germany. And then that evolution will continue as the Germanic tribes became the Danes into what is today Denmark. Woden changed into Odin. When we think about deities, I think a lot of people try to apply a finite mindset to that infinite being, right? When you move away from that definition and start thinking of that deity as more of an energy signature, for lack of a better description, I think you're able to easily become more fluid between all religions, all spiritual understandings, when we move away from putting labels on things and move to understand the energy signatures. In my mind, not even my mind, but even in my heart, I understand Odin as a representation of masculine energy. I understand Freya, and Freya is my feminine energy. Those energies are modifying my physical being for whatever I need it to do.
And that fluidity you mentioned amongst all religions, they're like mountains. You can have Islam, you can have Christianity, Judaism, all these different religions, and they're all different mountains. But the one thing that connects them is they all point up.
That's right. And you're talking about essentially a basic principle that supports all spirituality is that we recognize the energy that is moving through people, to people, from people. It's this energy, and the management of that energy is what makes physical life possible. Getting away from labels. When I pray, when I meditate, I use the words Odin and the words Freya as an identification of a type of energy. Is that any different than a Christian calling out to his God or a Muslim calling out to their God? No, it's not. I use labels, if you will, names that give credit to my ancestry. I recognize them, that they're just energies, they're bundles of energy that have quite a bit of abilities that I can use to better my life and to better that life of others. That's what I try to do.
Beautiful. I love that. Labels to me are for the lost.
You always have to remember that the human finite mind, we seek for labels. We seek for something to call you. So if I don't know your name and we meet in public, hey, buddy, or a friend, or whatever, those labels that we're applying to that individual are no different than the labels that we apply to our deity figure. When you look at an infinite being with infinite energy, it does not surprise me at all that people standing on the other side of the world may see that entity differently than I do. It doesn't surprise me at all. I use an analogy in the book, and I'm not going to give any spoilers, but if you took 200 people and you set them around the rim of the Grand Canyon, we're all looking at the Grand Canyon, but we see it differently. We have a different perspective of that canyon. So understanding that you have your different perspective and the different filters in your mind that you apply to seeing that, we begin to loosen our grip on my label's right, your label's wrong, and those types of discussions, which does nothing for the betterment of humankind.
I agree. The perspectival lens is different, and how you look through that lens, depending on your belief system, your culture, your conditioning, and all that other stuff that we become so attached to, influences how we see things. I tend to look at things more from a frequency-based aspect rather than a chemistry-based aspect. It's much more radiational as distinct from gravitational. And an important aspect of your theology revolves around ancestral veneration and a deep connection to the land, which is so important, especially in today's world. Can you share how you honor your ancestors and establish a profound relationship with the natural world in your role as a shaman?
Absolutely. What a great way to put that, by the way. Firstly, let's step back and we're going to do a little physiology for just a moment. When you're conceived, that moment of conception for a physical being, we're given DNA. We're given a snapshot of our parents' DNA at that moment in time where they come together. DNA markings and those genetic pieces that come with that bring with them this thread from hundreds of thousands of years. So you're getting your ancestry at the DNA level. Now, we know, science has proven, when we focus on something, anything, pick something, when we focus on it, we're sending energy to it. We're taking our energy, we're bringing it down, and we're focusing it on whatever it is. If we start to think about our ancestry, those who came before us and took whatever journey they had to meet their spouses, to produce offspring, to create generation after generation, what we're doing is we're passing energy to them because we're starting to think about them, right? So we know when we focus on something, we're sending energy. The energy is going to them. What do they do with this energy? Is it a waste of time? No, they've moved beyond the physical realm. They're in the spiritual realm now. They're alive and well. And we have to remember, for them, we have to remove this concept of space and time. The spiritual realm has no such rules. My great grandmother and I communicate frequently. We talk a lot. Why? Because I think about her. I remember her. I put those visions into my mind and my heart. So I'm sending her energy. She's sending me energy. And she's helping me to understand. In her world, she was born in Bjergbysund, which is on the Jutland of Denmark. She grew up her whole life there until her and my great-grandfather decided to get married there across the border in Germany. And then soon after moved here to the United States. In my research right now, it's 54 generations of people born in that area. All of that history comes with her. And we have to recognize the importance of that because, as you mentioned, I love the way you put it, that's what forms who we are. That's what lays the groundwork for what we will become. When we talk about you going out and interacting with your world, that chemistry at which is created by your physical sensory input in your body that you interpret as emotion, the foundation for your understanding of that was built by them. They were molded, they adapted, they manipulated their DNA. So by the time the generation after them is born, we see a manipulation of that DNA towards adapting to whatever it was. And that process continues till we get to me. And then that process again continues for my children and now grandchildren to continue that continued migration or evolution, if you will, of our very DNA, of the very foundation of what makes us who we are and how we interpret our world. That is provided by the ancestors. So having the energy and the focus and the concentration, I think one of the real exciting things for me that happened as I migrated from being a pastor to a shaman is I began to adopt more and more of my ancestry into my world. So paired Danish dishes. I decorated my office in more of a Norse, and I began to feel their energy as I did that. So I'm making this cultural connection to what they knew to be true. So I think it's absolutely paramount. To your point about Jord or Mother Earth, Jord is the center of all things physical, right? So she's where we are. As we connect to her, she's a constant source of energy. We've proven in science that she produces a frequency. I want to say it's like 7.83 hertz or something. She's sending energy all the time to everyone, carte blanche, across the table. For us to truly embrace that, take it into our being, we have to make contact with her. All too often in the modern day world here in Anchorage, this is why I love to travel here in Alaska. Here in Anchorage, we find that there's a lot that's paved over, right? Parking lots and roads and streets and everything. That's not Mother Earth. That's man. But it doesn't take you very far. Here in Alaska, you can walk 3 miles and be in wilderness, be out with Mother Earth, be out with Jord, and just feel her and be with her and feel that energy really creeping into your existence. As we embrace these things, our ancestries and the energy of Jord, I believe it begins to help us control our mental health. That's what I use when I'm speaking with some of my friends, and I say to them, you've got all these struggles, you've got these negative energies, they're spinning, you may feel that they're out of control. Go talk to Jord. Go put your feet in the water of some creek somewhere and just feel Jord pulsing through you. Think of your ancestors. One of the things I love to promote, particularly with younger people, is I talk about their ancestors. Where did they come from? What makes you who you are? As they begin to embrace that, I believe it helps give them energy to combat negative energies that other people may offer. And certainly it rebolsters our internal fire of hope and love. We start bringing down the defense mechanisms. We can start spreading our just happiness around. That's really what begins to help us reset all those patterns that have been drilled into our minds through the millennia and really find true happiness and comfort. That's what I try to do with everyone I speak to.
What a healing remedial balm that is. When you have
You
that
have
sense of identity and you can track, trace, and evaluate what the origin story was as far back as you possibly can go, you can then start to correct or realign what possibly maybe the last or other generations couldn't get to at that time. But we're afforded the opportunity to do that when we understand the origin story as far back as we can. Would you agree with that?
I would 100%. I'm always reminded, and I tell people, and to your point exactly, I always tell people about, I was watching a television show about, what's his name? George Lucas, the man who made Star Wars. And he said when he made the first Star Wars, they didn't have the technology that they had to when they made the last bunch. So he so badly wanted to go back and remake the first one with the technology that he had now. The same thing applies for spiritual energy. Some folks, particularly, you have to remember also, you've got probably a millennium, maybe a millennium and a half of suppression, where practicing spirituality, not in the Christian or the Muslim or the monotheistic practice, if you were practicing outside that, chances are you were burned on a stake or something more rude. So you have all of these centuries of suppression based on fear, right? We were afraid of dying. So I think there's a lot of ancestors that we find in that time frame that really fit that mold, that wanted to expand upon their spiritual understanding, their ancestry, but were terrified for fear of life and death, really. And I think that's led into where we've arrived today, where now we have a little bit more of a spiritual freedom. People are understanding. I think the message is getting out that there is more to spirituality than we see in stereotypical Sunday sermons. There's much more to this. And my message to most people is I try to tell them spirituality equals better mental health, because now you have energy at which to combat negativity, of doubt, of all of those things. You have that energy. Using that to your betterment and to the betterment of your friends and your family, those are what we should all seek to do.
That's so important. It makes me wonder when you were talking about DNA. I've always wondered that as much as we study DNA, I wonder if it's studying us.
I believe when we get to that aha moment in our DNA research, in today's science, and we get to that aha moment of DNA, we're going to realize it's spirituality. It's our spiritual connection that, as I was taught in the early trances I went through to write the book, those trances brought to me this understanding that it was at that moment where we are bonded with our spiritual entities for our physical existence. Our whole life, we're going to be bonded with our spiritual self. And it's at that moment of conception where that DNA is actually being constructed, aligned, that we find our connection as a physical being to the spiritual realm. It's that connection, I believe, that many have tried to stifle for one reason or another. Many have a good spiritual connection and a good balance. They just don't recognize it. They may be successful in life and they think they did it by hard work and all of those things, when in fact, it's their spiritual self that are setting up opportunities for them to become successful. So it's that moment that I think we're going to get to in science. We've already found the sixth sense. So science has already proven that. Science is coming back, and I believe as we walk through all of this energy and we speak about energy and the management of energy, science is already beginning to prove a lot of this. And they're going, could they have been right for 1,500 years? Yes, we were. You just weren't listening and weren't willing to listen. So I think the aha moment will be that when we discover scientifically that spiritual connection.
That leads to the significance of what I'm seeing is that many people are moving away from the busy work to their life work because that has a connection. The significance leads and connects them to something higher than themselves, as distinct from the busy work, the gravitational pull towards, I've got to be busy, I've got to do it, here's my checklist, and so on and so forth.
I agree. I think people are moving away from checklists and more towards feeling their way, feeling what's pulling them towards whatever discovery is in their future.
As a shaman, I would imagine you engage in shamanic journeying to communicate with higher realms and seek guidance. This practice is rooted in Celtic and Norse traditions. Can you recount a particularly profound or transformative encounter with a spirit during your shamanic journeying? And how did this experience impact your spiritual insights?
There's been so many, starting with what I call that first night. That was electrifying. And it changed my whole frame of mind because I realized through the manipulation and the management of energy, a physical being stood before me. I could feel him. He had braziers on, huge leather braziers. And as I grabbed his forearm, I felt it. It wasn't something that it was that, oh, glancing thought or whatever. No, this is something that you grab a hold of and you hold on to. Yet, how could that be? My physical mind struggled to grasp. Additional story, my backyard is fenced in. There's no way in. It's gated and locked. You're not getting in that backyard unless you're like 15 feet tall and you can step over the fence. I have an 8-foot fence all around my yard. My mind struggled to understand how this physical being was here in my yard. And that really was the moment for me when I realized that the world before me is purely spiritual on an energy level that could be transmitted into my being to make something real, to make something, for lack of a better way, seem to be on the ground before me. I couldn't argue with it. I couldn't argue with the slice on my arm. I couldn't argue with it. As I walked inside after the event, my dog reminded me that I was cut. I was bleeding. We have a hardwood floor. There are still, I'm sure, remnants of that blood in the cracks of the hardwood floor.
Describe the scene.
This goes back to some of the cultural antiquity. They swore an oath. And to swear an oath, firstly, you always swore an oath on the ring of Uller. That ring had value. It was important. It was a connection directly to Odin himself. But you signed it with blood. That's what we did. I should say what they did. During our discussion, me and Odin, in the vision that I had, I committed an oath to Odin. And to sign off on this oath, we cut our arms to form a pool of blood that mixed between us. And then I had a knife because it's all I had on me. He had an axe. So we cut our forearms as we embraced each other's forearms to create a pool of blood between our arms that then signified the bonding, the oath. This is a real scar I have today. Again, going back to the reality of it, I'm still, even today, sometimes I sit in quiet moments and contemplate how Odin came to me in my yard, protected all the way around, and yet he was able to be there in person. My brain is absolutely convinced that he was there in person because I felt him. I looked into his eyes. I felt, I don't know if you've ever been alone in a room and had somebody walk up behind you and you can just feel their presence. In the same way, here was this man, probably, I would say, maybe a head above me in height, probably twice my width, standing before me in this armor and great cape, but he was real. I can't express enough the power that had on me. And as time has gone by, I look back and I go, I was standing in 11 inches of snow and barefoot, and yet I have no damage to my feet, my legs, nothing like that. I believe I quoted in the book as I got back on the porch, which is right outside of our door, is whatever it was that was blocking that part. I began to feel the cold in my feet because I was outside and my brain was all of a sudden, and it was like, I can't tell you how impactful that was to have that vision and the reality of that scene play out in my life. But there's been many others. I've had moments where I've been in meditation or I've been in trances as time has gone on and I'm communicating with my ancestors and whatnot, and they'll drop this piece of knowledge on me, knowledge that I had never considered and I had never thought of. I always tell people, I say, I was dumb before this happened. I didn't know quantum physics. Sure, who doesn't try to pretend they do, but I didn't really know how energy transmitted. So as this process has gone forward and I've meditated and I've done trance work and I've channeled individuals, just a wealth of knowledge where you begin to understand things that you just maybe not have thought of, or even if you did, there was nothing to connect. Just recently, I had a trance. I was doing some trance work and making some notes, and the whole concept of deja vu was explained to me. I was like, originally, okay, I'd never thought of it. Or either that or I had the mind's eye from, what is that show? The Matrix, where the cat walks by twice. It's how similar. Oh, they're really similar. The spiritual entity with whom I was working with explained to me that our ancestors, as they're sending us knowledge, some of the knowledge comes with visions and it gets plugged into our brain. So we get this vision of something happening, something occurring, that I feel a certain way, I see a certain thing, or I hear a certain thing, and it gets plugged in the back of our memory. We don't think about it. And then something happens in our lives where, wow, I've seen that before. No, technically you haven't, but your brain does. Your brain thinks it does because an ancestor has given us a very similar vision, and all of a sudden now it makes sense. And now you see it in your life. Oh, deja vu. Those types, and there's just been thousands of them. I probably have 4 what I call the books of life, and they are these old, I don't know if you can see this, wherever the camera is. So I take notes in this kind of book. These books, they have this old paper, and that's why I really love them. So you could see where am I at?
Just out of focus. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I can see that. Yeah, it's a bit blurry. I love
this
that.
is all written. These are all written in Old Norse.
Wow.
So they're all written in runes for when it first started occurring. And I have 3 of these books of just notes after notes explaining energy, explaining focus, explaining things like deja vu, explaining all these points. Any of the pages are one of those aha moments for me where I go, wow, maybe I used to think that humans were so unique in the big picture of things. No, the universe has been doing this for a very long time. We're at the end of the line, so to speak. And then concepts like time and space, all of these concepts that, sure, I put some level of validity to, but you don't put a whole lot of thought process. It's just, okay, I realize that until some of these spiritual entities explain to you the value, the reason you have these things, and the reason these laws were applied to the physical realm and not to the spiritual realm. So there's been hundreds, if not thousands, of those moments where I realize, firstly and foremost, I'm dealing with someone who has experienced both sides of life. They understand the physical realm, they understand the spiritual realm, they understand the interaction between those two. It's been very enlightening. And again, I was a blue collar person before I received the call to be a minister. In my ministry, I assisted. That's really where I started working with veterans, helping them to, when I got done with my service 30 years ago, quite a while ago, there was really no one there that could say, oh, welcome back to civilian life. This is how it works. There was nobody really there for that. And so it wasn't until I'd gotten through that and struggled and I fought my way, sometimes good, sometimes bad, that it occurred to me as I came to the ministry, that's what I needed to do. I needed to help people come back to becoming a civilian again, because it is a huge mind shift. But then it dawned on me what they're looking for. What do we look for when we get out of the military? We look for that camaraderie, that friendship. Have we ever considered talking with our ancestors? There's hundreds of millions of them. Pick one, pick a family, pick a generation. There is plenty of communion you can take from your ancestors. So lots of points there.
That's beautiful, Mark. I love that. I think that common union that you can find. I know you're helping vets and come from a place where their amygdala is so hyped up from the battlefield that to come back to civilian life with that still turning over is quite an adjustment to make.
Because you're training your brain to respond to the combat situations, and then you get out, your brain is still trained and operates ready for combat. Coming back to civilian life where it's not everything is a threat kind of thing, it is a daunting task for many. Hopefully I've been of some value.
Thank you for the holy work that you're doing. That's huge. I want to move on to symbolism of animals and mythic beings, because one of the things I train myself in is to be symbolically literate. I like the visual aspect of things, but I want to understand what the essence of that actually means, rather than, oh, that's a snake or that's a gargoyle, but what does it actually mean? I know that in Celtic and Norse traditions, there's a rich symbolism of animals and mythic beings. And in your ecology of practices, how do you interpret the significance of animals and mythical creatures, say wolf or raven or serpent, which hold, I would imagine, a deeper meaning and significance in both cultural contexts?
I think we address animals, particularly the animal spirits of our brothers and sisters who have chosen another life form. They have chosen to travel a path of understanding of something that we, as physical humans, we don't work with. We don't understand. So I think as we look at humans, and I think to your point, the UlfHednar is the spirit of the wolf. It is meant in Old Norse, it meant a pelt of wolf. And likewise, the berserkers, which have a claim everywhere, were of the bear. So they were brute force. That was their MO, if you will. That they went forward with this brute mentality of destroying the enemy. So I think animals represent to us a place in nature. Everything has a place. It has a balance. The thing that humans don't get is that there is a balance that is achieved by the life-death cycle of animals. As our brothers and sisters who have chosen another form, as they move through their life, they understand what is, not what could be, not what was. They understand what is. The simplicity found in animal cognition, if you will, is this ability to say, I understand that you have bad feelings about me, and that's really great. But what is our relationship this minute? Not what it was, not what it could be. It's living for the moment. When we look at different animals, certainly the serpents, the dragons, Celtics had the dragons, they had large beings. We're looking at much the same way that mythology describes the actions of deities. We find this methodology at which finite minds can explain whatever, this energy that's happening around them, whether it be in their perception that bad or negative energy, or whether it be the fairies that are light and cute and maybe mischievous sometimes, those types of behaviors and actions that we can't explain. We can't explain any other way. And so we, again, going back to our deities and our labels, I think we have a tendency as humans to see certain characteristics, maybe certain traits of an animal family. We then associate that trait with that animal. Therefore, we understand and we worship, maybe, I don't know if worship's a good idea, but we recognize that value or that character of that animal family. We see it time and time again when we talk about like the wolf or the bear, certainly for Jorgenminder, the serpent that wraps the earth for Norse mythology. This is, yes, there is bad. Yes, it's wrapping all around the world. But if we don't go fishing like Thor did, it will continue to do that until Ragnarok. And that's okay. A lot of it just really comes back to this understanding of particular characteristics or traits associated with a family of animals. And I also think that you see more depending on where you are in the world, right? Ravens are pretty much worldwide. They have always been, and I don't know if you've ever seen a raven up close, but they're big damn birds.
Yeah.
They're big. And with the carnage created by thousands of years of war, we see where ravens would have been there, right? Because ravens are scavengers. They're going to scavenge the battlefield once it's cleaned up. So there was a value there, right? Why? Scavengers are going to go out and they're going to find knowledge, wisdom. They're going to report to their scavenging knowledge and wisdom. So the raven was considered a very smart animal, and they are. They're very intelligent, by the way. But why? Because they're out scavenging knowledge. They're out scavenging wisdom. They're out learning. They're seeing different worlds and different environments because they can travel on the gift of the spirit wind. A lot of it comes back to that. It's just trying to associate characteristics or traits, particularly with a certain family of animals. And those were just carried forward and celebrated. It comes really down to what was available locally, right? The men and women of Scandinavia certainly didn't talk about the antelope. There was no room in our vernacular for antelope. Why? Because there was none. We had deer, maybe, sure. Or a lion didn't come in until you find the people coming up from the migratory path out of Africa who actually had exposure to a lion. So they had to deal with it, or tigers, or things of those natures where you had many different characteristics, but because a particular geographical area had no reference to that animal or that spirit, that force, that wasn't included in that group. But I think you find the same thing in all groups, right? So you look at the Hindus, and they are certainly going to have recognition of the power of the tiger. Why? Because they've seen a tiger. It's there with them. Whereas the Norse, yeah, we know there was no tigers. The Celts, I think they, by and large, when we talk particularly with the Celtic dragons, we had just a powerful energy source that couldn't be explained, whatever it was, whether good, bad, or indifferent. So they attributed it to these large, sometimes huge creatures who could fly. I've heard all kinds of stories. My grandmother, a very avid Celtic dragon lady, loved them all, could tell me the families of dragons, the whole 9 yards. She sounded like she was an advisor to that How to Train Your Dragon show. She knew them all. I really felt that there was an energy attached to it. It wasn't all bad. There were dragons that were very protective. There were dragons that were good to have around. They were lucky and they could obtain gold and all of these things. But it was a massive energy source. That was really the whole theme that came across, particularly as I spoke to my grandmother about it. She was very adamant that I understand how they affected me in my modern day life, because I face dragons every day. Now the dragons are now within our minds. The energy is the same. I don't have to worry about the physical damage, obviously, but the mental damage and the mental carnage can be just as damning.
Symbolically, I believe that wolves were symbols of loyalty and independence and adaptability. My question is, how do these qualities manifest in your spiritual practice as an UlfHednar And how do you integrate them into your daily life?
As far as I'm concerned, the wolf recognized this idea that strong and silent is recognizing the power within and embracing that and understanding the value of family, of loyalty to family, of supporting our own. Certainly, my brethren of the UlfHednar would have been very loyal to their clan to death, really. We were very loyal, as I'm loyal to Odin. We recognize that his power is all things. Do I think that Odin supersedes God or he's superior to God? No, I think you're looking at Odin, you're just looking at him from a different picture, from a different
Mm.
perspective. If you want to call him God, I'm sure Odin wouldn't mind. It's just a matter of perspective. And I think that really is where the loyalty comes into play, but recognizing, harnessing, and embracing our own power, our own self-reliance, our own ability to do what's necessary to survive. I think that's what, for me, comes from my association with my brothers, the wolves.
Maybe I'm incorrect here, but obviously correct me if I'm not right about this. But I was looking at navigating fragmentary sources of Norse mythology and culture, because as I understand it was passed down orally, leading to possibly fragmented records. So, how do you approach interpreting these sources, and how do you bridge the gaps to uncover the true wisdom and beliefs?
Firstly, yes, I agree with you 100%. What we know, what modern humans know about the UlfHednar and even the Vikings, even the action of Vikings and those earlier years of Scandinavian life, it was indeed passed orally. There was no written language until a little later. All they had to write on was rocks. So it probably is not the easiest material to make mistakes on. When we talk about Norse mythology and what I recognize as being UlfHednar, my birthright, I guess I don't read the books. I talk to the ancestors and I get straight scoop. You get to Snorri, and Snorri wrote the sagas, which Norse paganism is based loosely on. And he didn't write those till the 12th century. And he had already been converted when he wrote. So he was already a Christian when he wrote those sagas. How reliable are they as, say, a religious text? Probably not very. When I started my journey of becoming associating with the Norse, one of the things that I was very clear in my own mind about was that I would get the story from the people who lived it. So I wanted to talk to my ancestors. I wanted to do trance work and channel so that I could hear what this really meant from those people. Then I could read the sagas or any of them for that matter, almost with the same eye that I watched the Marvel films and Thor and him doing his thing. So yeah, it's out there. Yes, I understand it's all well and good. Those are stories that were made as almost as motivation speeches, for lack of a better word. So those stories were kept going so that I was encouraging my children to be honorable, to be courageous, to be strong, to be all of those things based on those stories. I don't believe, as a Celtic Norse myself, I don't really subscribe to many of those stories outside of the Marvel films. I'm much more energy, love, peace, harmony, which you really don't read in those stories.
I love the direct connection. That's a beautiful way of being able to bring that knowledge through. And with your rich ancestral heritage in mind, how do you envision your teachings and your practices contributing to the understanding and preservation of the UlfHednar tradition for future generations?
Great question. That really is what kind of drives me to get up every day is I don't hope to be the UlfHednar of the movies. I want you to learn about being an UlfHednar and what that is. So my goal now is to drive the curiosity, is to hopefully inspire others to say, what is that? How can I associate those kind of practices in my life and make it better? So that's more what I'm geared for. It's more what I'm hoping for as I go about my daily life and interact with hundreds of people. Am I out there trying to create another UlfHednar? No. Odin has to choose that. I'm just here to hopefully encourage your curiosity, that you will go and learn about the UlfHednar and what they did and why they did. And then hopefully you'll begin your journey of cultural association where you can begin to talk with your own ancestors, grow whom you are, learn who you are and why you are. So I think it's so critical that each of us embrace our ancestral past, whatever that may include. My mother is a Scot. Her family comes from Scotland, and my father is the Dane, and his family comes from Denmark. So in my ancestral path, as my mother was doing the genealogy, she found out that she's actually Danish as well, because the Danes migrated over to Scotland, where they bred and assimilated into that culture and that locality, to where, yeah, I'm 60 some percent Dane. But understanding that ancestry is what gives, or should give us each some comfort in who we are, why we are what we are.
And I want to touch on your book, Return to Final, which I started reading last night, as we spoke about earlier, which I'm totally captivated by. From what I've read so far, is that it promises a scientific exploration of spirituality's core, bridging the gap between the spiritual energy of the universe and our physical existence. Can you share some insights or perceptions into how readers can tap into these ancient teachings to enrich their lives?
Absolutely. This is my greatest joy, by the way, is helping people discover this. One of the first things we need to learn to do is stop listening with our ears. Our whole existence, when we're conceived, born, our brain is just an empty black box. That empty black box has 5 tubes that go into it at different locations. From those 5 tubes comes the 5 physical sensory inputs, whether it be a vision or a sound or a taste or a smell. All of those come into the brain, and then they're grouped by this relational connection, if you will, suspended in a chemistry that is our body. And that chemistry is maintained a balance called the pH balance. If our pH balance works, then our vision, our hearing, or whatever in sensory input transmits data cleanly. Everything's great. It goes real quick. It all works. And we can build our knowledge and our intelligence on that. But when it's clouded, when it's corrupted, when that pH balance comes so far out of whack that the signals are lost or delayed, we then store that thinking that it's real knowledge, thinking that it's good stuff, when in fact it's corroded, it's corrupt. This has a tendency to build, because our intellect builds on these foundations that we established when we're very young. And as we grow, we're just building on top of that foundation. So we're making this tower of knowledge. If those foundational pieces are found to be faulty, potentially this is where people are having a great deal of differences, is when one of those foundational pillars crumbles, we have the potential of a cataclysmic corrupt, as everything comes down, because now the relationships aren't there. The tower that we've built of knowledge was all built on these cornerstones, and we just pulled one out. Bad things have a tendency to happen. What I hope I have conveyed in the book in its entirety is letting people know that the mission in our life is to understand emotion, because ultimately we want to get to a place where I say that we can provide empathy to others without any physical sensory input. That's where we want to get to. Because obviously, once we shed our physical form and we're a spiritual entity, that's all we got left. We have just the knowledge that we've trained ourselves to be a spiritual entity, right? So understanding that and helping people embrace their cultural simplicity to help control the chemical imbalances that we create within our minds that causes these physical ailments and these mental ailments that affect the world. What the book does and what my teachings in real life do is help people understand their role in embracing and establishing their intellect in such a way that there should not be any concern for one of those lower pillars being pulled out. That's really the whole crux of things in the book. I really laid out, help people understand how we got here as humans, how we got through hundreds of thousands of years of evolution to where we are today, from both a physical brain capacity to an intellect to an emotional balance, and how all the major influences, such as religion and spirituality, the effect that those things have on our basic mental health. And I explained it in such a way it makes sense. The first step is we got to know who we are. We got to figure that out. And sometimes that's a hard cross to bear for people. It can be very challenging. I realize that. But only through the knowledge of the self can we begin to expand to who we can be. That's really where it all starts. And meditation's probably the best way. In the book, I offer exercises in each chapter where I give some topics of meditation and some ideas start bouncing around in your head. And the reason I do that is the journey at which you have to engage upon is your own. I can lead you to the trailhead, but the journey is for you to take. Hopefully, I stir some questions that really get you thinking about what you think you know and how do you validate that? How do you concrete that? And once you can do that, then everything else comes naturally, because once you've freed the mind, cleared the aura, now we can receive spiritual energy very clearly, and we can have these communications with the ancestors who can then teach us things that we didn't think we needed to know.
That's well said. It goes back to that ancient wisdom of know thyself. And
absolutely true.
Where can people find you, and do you have any passing words?
Well, start with where to find me. The book, The Turn to Final, is available at Amazon and our Barnes & Noble, pretty much anywhere you get your books. The website to get a hold of me, which is the best way by far, is UlfHednar, and I'll spell that because a lot of folks struggle with it. It's AK for Alaska, and then ULF as in Frank, HED as in Delta, NAR. That's my main website. And from the website, you can get to all of our podcasts. You can actually go to YouTube and see me on YouTube, Facebook, the whole social media spread. We're out there producing a message, hopefully of hope and peace. Also, the thing I would also recommend is every week we do an online, I'd call it a radio show, but it's not really a radio show, but it's on the platform called Wisdom. And Wisdom, where you can dial in, so to speak, and we can talk and communicate. And I talk about that last week's podcast where I'm letting other people, getting other perspectives, helping to expand both my knowledge and theirs. And so that to me is very important. As far as parting words, one of the biggest things that I think most people struggle with is the fact that I'm not responsible for how you interpret something. And it causes a great deal of emotional distress for many people when they think, oh, that person doesn't like me because of X, or that person doesn't feel good about me. One of the things that I've really taken away from 10 years now of communicating with my ancestors is that they don't care what I think. They really don't. They don't care what I feel. That's not what they're here to do. They're here to produce a message. They're here to tell me something, but they're good within themselves. They don't need my approval. That's where I really hope that people are able to get to, is that they understand that they really are as good as they think they are. They're more than enough. And if someone out there in their world doesn't recognize that, it's that person who's not recognizing's problem to deal with, not theirs. My favorite phrase, and I will use it till the end, is what you seek, you will find. If you seek hate, division, and discontent, you'll find it. It's everywhere amongst us. Look at the news every night. But if you get out of bed and you seek joy, happiness, harmony, peaceful coexistence with our fellow life force. You'll find that too. So the answer is seek joy.
That's a powerful and potent message. As we conclude this captivating conversation with Dr. Mark Wiseman, we are reminded that the path to enlightenment and healing is as diverse as the individuals who seek it. Dr. Wiseman's journey from pastor to shaman reflects the infinite possibilities of self-discovery and transformation. From what I can glean, his teachings resonate with the wisdom of our ancestors, reminding us of the importance of honoring our roots and forging a profound connection with the natural world. And through shamanic practices, Dr. Wiseman invites us to explore the realms beyond the ordinary, where spirits and symbols hold the key to deeper understanding. And in a world filled with complexity and challenges, as we see today, Dr. Wiseman's wisdom offers a guiding light. And for me, he reminds us that our destinies are intricately woven into the cosmic web of existence. And through self-discovery, healing, and embracing and embodying our unique journeys, we can find harmony, we can find peace, we can find purpose. I trust this conversation inspires you to embark on your own journey of self-discovery, to honor your ancestors, and to connect with the mysteries of the spirit realm. And as you navigate the modern world, remember that the timeless teachings of the UlfHednar and the wise warrior mentality, finding strength and peace and meaning within. Dr. Wiseman, thank you so much. It's been an honor and a privilege. And there's so much more I'd love to delve into with you. Hopefully you will come back.
I would love to.
It's been an amazing experience. The energy, insights, and the wisdom you've shared is absolutely invaluable. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. I will include my energy transmissions to you, that your listeners do find the peace, do find the hope. Remember, my friends, we can't have our hope taken from us. We only surrender it. Therefore, the conscious decisions to not surrender hope is on us.